Steve, thanks so much for joining us today here in the beginning of 2024.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're a Google Analytics guy, right? Like I know that's GA4 today. It used to be Universal. I mean, you're in analytics, really good data. Tell us about the current state of Google Analytics GA4 now that we're 6 months past last summer's cutover. Where are we today?
I don't know. It's still pretty messy, right? I think a lot of folks that I talk to are still struggling with understanding how data is being collected, how to look at reports, how to just use it the same way they did Universal Analytics. So I think that's part of that is just that learning curve. I still think that the product itself is a bit immature in a way. It still has a ways to go. So there's just issues. There's some bugginess in here and there, but overall, I think most folks can get a similar amount of data that they could and similar amount of insights and reporting they could in Universal Analytics as long as they are set up properly and they know what they're doing. So it's I don't know. We're still not quite there yet.
Yeah, we know the point of the show here is to break things down for folks. But before we can do that, we really need to, we need to understand where we're at. So thanks for that recap. If you look forward 10 years from now, why did Google do this? What are they trying to accomplish? What does this look like, whether it's 3, 5, 10 years from now? Like if everybody just got an equal amount of data, why did we go through this foundational change in the Google Analytics product? What will the future hold for us?
I don't know that Google's kind of outright come out and said why they switched over. I think part of it is Universal Analytics. The previous versions of Universal Analytics have been around since early 2000s. So a lot has changed on the web since then. Apps became a lot more important. And before it was just websites. Now mobile apps are important. GA4 is based on Firebase, which is the kind of the precursor to GA4. That was all app based, right? So it was only for apps, tracking apps, and apps function very differently than websites. So I think that was kind of the start of it. And then I think there's probably some privacy concerns with some legal issues and things that they're getting into with how they're tracking data and what data they are tracking. So I think there's some of that as well. So I don't get the sense that anybody at Google's, saying this is a much better product. This is why we're pushing this out. I think there's other pieces to this that we may not know about. But yeah, I think there's some history there with another product they were using, trying to bolt it into a Google Analytics type thing.
Yeah, I never, it seems like for years now, I've never known exactly what Google was up to. They seem to tell us after the fact and even revise history kind of to put their narrative together. So maybe when Google figures it out, they'll let us know.
Yeah, exactly.
And 5 years from now, we'll go, that's why they did it. That's what they were up to. Well, speaking of Google products, I think one of the products that you use a lot is Looker Studio. What is Looker Studio? Why would I care about this product as a digital marketer?
Looker Studio is a dashboarding reporting tool. It's very visual. You can create reports and dashboards very easily that not only from Google products, but really from many, many other type of products. So if you're on an e-com site, you're on Shopify, there's connectors to pull in all your Shopify data, and you can then blend that data with your GA data or, regardless of the source, right? So it's kind of agnostic in a way. Of course, there's a slant to Google products and makes those easier, but there's lots of third-party connectors that allow you to pull in data from multiple sources and then visualize it very easily. So it keeps you from having to go to 4 or 5 different places to try to get similar data or then compile it into a spreadsheet or whatever. It just makes it easier for marketers to go to one spot and say, all right, I've got 5 different dashboards I can look at, or here's one dashboard that has blends of all the types of data I need in one spot. So it really makes reporting, insights, and just kind of helping make decisions a lot easier than going to multiple sources.
So a couple questions to follow that up, because I'm a fan of dashboards. aggregating data, data warehousing. I mean, I'm a technologist, right? I'm a data geek. I think we have that in common. Looker Studio, even for me, seems a little overwhelming. I mean, what is the learning curve to get into a product? I mean, GA4 is already difficult for me and for
Yeah.
folks. Now to
Yeah.
overlay that with the dashboard, I mean, what are the? I mean, what is the probability? What's the chances? What's the learning curve? Like, what would someone have to? What is the project to undertake, or they just need to hire someone to do it? Like, talk me through what a brand should be doing or how they go about this.
It depends, right? It depends on how, like I was just talking about, you can merge multiple lots of different data sources and get one spot. That's the more advanced, complicated side of things. If you're just looking at one data source, let's just say Google Analytics or Google Ads, right? There are endless templates out there you can go find. There's a marketplace for templates. You can look for those templates, you can import those in, and then can make your connection to the data source, and then you've got a dashboard. And then you can go configure it if you want. So you can get to a starting point pretty quickly without having to do a whole lot of work to get there. If you want to do more advanced things, like I was talking about with blending data and all that, that's another thing. But very at its surface, you can get to a nice looking, easy to consume kind of visual report pretty quickly.
So these templated dashboards sitting on top of Google products, do you find there's a bigger need for this today because of GA4 to kind of be able to control your dashboards and reporting? Like, is that one of the reasons that maybe you've dug into Looker Studio a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, whenever I talk to folks, they're like, oh, I've been in Universal Analytics for years. I knew exactly where to go. I knew how to get the data. And part of that is just the history we've built up and we know it and we kind of got used to it. Because the first time you got into Universal Analytics, it didn't make sense, right? Like you still had to, there was a learning curve, so to speak. I think GA4 has a different kind of learning curve, maybe a little more complicated, but you can create custom reports and you can do more things than you could in Universal in terms of viewing your data. But I guess I steer more towards the Looker Studio side of it because there's so much more you can do. And I hate to kind of limit it just to Google products because I do a lot of work with e-commerce websites or either B2E and B2B sites too. And the B2B sites use other tools where they're tracking maybe trial signups or other things. And so that's where your true source of conversions are happening, right? And you're always going to have this gap between the true source and Google Analytics, 5, 10, 15% gaps. And so if you are pulling in this other data sources, it just gives you richer data, more accurate data, really. But yeah, on the Google Analytics side, it helps people get over that learning curve. So, because most people don't really want to totally learn it, they just want to get the data. And if that's really what you're after, there's Looker Studio or other tools like that make that a lot easier.
Yeah. Do you have not necessarily a use case? You can just be an example of tracking that 5% gap or looking at let's go with B2B. So in a situation you have B2B because you have a demo sign up, you have a lead generation, whatever it might be. Let's say it's even in HubSpot. What's an example of how you would tie that together, what you might discover? How would you merge just a CRM, if you will, in your front end data for better insights? How would you do that using a product like Looker Studio?
At the very foundational side of it, I use it to make sure that the data in GA is accurate. That's always kind of a rub. Like that is 5%. Yeah, probably we're going to see that. If you're seeing like 30% gap, why is that? And you can basically connect your data to HubSpot, connect your data to GA, and overlay that. And you can have a trend chart that says, here's how many trials HubSpot's saying we have. Here's how many trials GA is saying we have. What's that delta? And is that delta all of a sudden now 50%, or did it close? Like you can see that trend over time. And it's just one way to monitor to make sure the data is being captured correctly.
Yeah, and in that use case, would you get as far as maybe, let's say that the B2B has a lead scoring, to get from marketing qualified to sales qualified leads? Would you go as far as maybe watch that type of depth in your analytics to maybe make a decision about your ads? Like, are you trying to do something that sophisticated, or is that too much?
I don't know. I haven't personally gone that route. I think you certainly can. And I think HubSpot's kind of in particular, has some decent reporting on their side too that you can do some of this with. But yeah, if you're trying to bring that back to the channel level, then yeah, that can be super important to or a way to look at that for sure.
Yeah. What about for e-commerce? Do you have an example where you've kind of went deep into the purchase, the transaction to get findings that maybe are more full experience, from beginning to end, not just the ad level, not just the web, but completely through the e-commerce platform?
Yeah, I think that comes into like that user journey, and this could be B2B or ecom, right? Like, what's that funnel look like? So in the ecom world, it's someone's hitting a product page. Are they adding that product to the cart? Are they then starting the checkout process? And then are they making the purchase? Are there places in that funnel where people are falling off?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a certain product that gets added to the cart a lot, but yet isn't getting purchased? Like, is there some kind of issue there? Or in the B2B space, is the funnel set up in such a way, if you've got like a 3-step form to fill out and they're making it to step 2, but they're never making it to step 3, what's happening, right? Like, is that because the form is too long? Is there too much? Are there issues there? So you can set up these kind of event-based tracking inside GA to understand where folks are falling off, build some reports against that, and then say, all right, we really have a problem here because people keep falling out there for whatever reason. Then that can lead to A/B testing and lots of other things, but this at least gives you that first insight into where there might be some issues.
Oh, you just said my favorite word. Well, not favorite word, but my let's call it the word of the year. Insights. So analytics, you get the data, you can put it in the dashboard, and getting the insights from the analytic data, man, that's the art. How do you think about getting insights from your analytics data?
I always start with like, what are those business questions we're trying to answer? Right? It's so easy to go in and say, let's just go track all these things, right? Like, but if we start back and say, what are the business questions we're trying to answer, and why? Like, if we can answer this question, what are we going to do with it? Just because we know that, I don't know, 50% of the people are falling off of this part of the form, can you just do something with that, right? Like, do you have the technology behind you? Do you have the dev team? Do you have other things that you can even impact that? So I think starting there to come up with those 5, 10, 15 questions you're trying to answer first, and how are those going to impact your business? And then saying, all right, do we have the data to support those questions, answer those questions, and get insights out of them? If we don't, let's get that set up. Then once we have the data, do we have a good way to kind of visualize that data to make it easy to pull those insights out of? And then once you're pulling that out, then what are you going to do with it? Is it just simple questions like, how many trials are we getting, and what channels are driving those trials? Like that's the kind of very fundamental things. All right, Google Ads is driving 2% of our trials, but we're spending, 50% of our revenue there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that a problem? So you can get to those insights, the kind of those very high level insights pretty easily inside a tool like GA. That's really what it's designed for. But I really start with those high level business questions first, and then make sure we have data to support it, and then make sure we have a way to interpret that data easily.
So do you for your, for the clients and brands that you have relationships with, do you do a form of monthly reporting, or do you help people set it up and then teach them how to read the data?
At this point in my career, I don't get into the monthly reporting and like the insight pulling for the clients as much. I am focused more on collect the business questions. Let's get the data. Let's get the reporting going. And then, they typically have a team or something to help, look at that. I certainly can support on that. I just don't have a lot of it at this point.
Okay. Well,
But yeah.
Well, let's
yeah.
go with what you do a lot of to kind of deconstruct or break it down, because it sounds like that these business questions are pretty important as a starting point. So I'm a marketer. I'm in charge of a brand. I mean, I let's say I know the basics good, but still, what would the step-by-step process be? I mean, not 1 to 20, but in general, for asking the business questions? How would I, how do I do this? How do I go about it?
From the marketing side of it, you can start with what channels are you running, right? So where are you running ads? Is that in a social channel? If so, which channels? If it's in paid search, it's in Google and Bing, whatever. Email, do you have emails that are going out regularly, newsletters, that kind of stuff? So just getting a sense of that side of it, like what kind of marketing is being run, what kind of ads you're running, and what kind of performance we're expecting from that channel too. Because the types of ads that you run or wherever you're running them, you may not expect the same result. For instance, if you're running something on paid social, right? Something on LinkedIn, say, and that LinkedIn, whatever you're pushing, is really just to try to get more awareness of your brand. And maybe you are trying to get some, folks to come to the site and maybe you're going to retarget them later or something. That's one tactic versus you're actually trying to drive a user back to actually sign up for a demo, right? So there's just different tactics on the marketing side that lead to certain types of conversion events or just events in general that happen on your website. And so I think that's where we really try to start is like, what types of things are important? What are those KPIs? What type of events do we want a user to do on your website? And what kind of channels are you using to drive those events?
Okay. So when I think of KPIs and metrics, we know the important ones. Like in GA, we've got bounce rate, engagement rate, events, conversions, time on site. Right? We've got all this. We've got all kinds of things we can do in GA, and I could help someone pick out their 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 KPIs, whatever type of coverage you're trying to get. What it sounds like that you're advocating for, and fine tune it for me, is that there's some set of outcomes you're looking for. And that's really the second step. Like, you've got GA set up, you've got your reports, but what are the outcomes you're looking for? Measure it. And then you even kind of alluded to a little while ago, hey, if there's friction, maybe we can start gathering more data on it. But if I know this outcome is happening or not happening, like, how do I keep track of all this? Like, I know I'm collecting analytics. I know I'm, but even something like, improving the metrics related to your shopping cart, either abandonment or, friction or not filling out forms. How do I go about using analytics as a tool to help me test and improve?
Yeah, I think the starting point is identifying what those KPIs are, right? So is it a form completion? Is it a purchase? Is it a trial sign up? Is it watching a video, right? Like, that maybe that's a thing on your site is you want people to watch these videos that you have produced, whatever. So it could be more content consumption. So once you've identified those, making sure that GA actually is set up to track those events. So they'll all come in as events. And then those events can then be associated as or assigned as a conversion. For instance, let's take the watching a video. So maybe that's something that's important. It's a B2B site, and maybe it's like a demo video or something, right? And you want to make sure people are watching at least 50% of that video. You can set up an event that gets triggered once that video has been watched by 50%. And then you can actually consider that a conversion. And then you can kind of pass that through. And then from there, then you can overlay your channel data and say, all right, well, we're driving X amount from LinkedIn to this page. That's now leading to, 20% of the folks actually watching the video. Okay, great. That's successful. So yeah, it's obviously business to business, but I think there's ways of making sure that the events are getting tracked appropriately and properly to then kind of go backwards to see how your marketing's impacting your conversions.
Right. So it's something along the lines of, what is the outcome you're trying to achieve? How do you measure it? Read the data, and then gather your insights and make adjustments. That sounds simplistic. It's way harder in real life.
It is.
To pull this off. Like, I've battled this for weeks and months sometimes just to get this lined up right.
Right.
So
right. And then once you have the data too, like, that goes back to kind of your original question is, how do you look at it? How do you actually interpret it? And that's why again, like I do like the Looker Studio side of it, because you can just take one data point and say, here's my YouTube
Mm-hmm.
views or my video views on my website.
Yeah.
And here's the ones that made 50%. Whatever those events are you're
Mm-hmm.
tracking, you can just pick points or KPIs and just make those very apparent. Because that's I think the hardest part is really once you've got it set up, like what do you do with the data? How do you get in there and actually learn something from it?
Real quick before we move on, you mentioned Looker Studio again, so let me cover real quick because I'm familiar. Like I use a product called DataBox, and again, it does a similar item. I can. It also has a learning curve. There's a couple other products, and we'll put them in the show notes. There's agency analytics. There's Supermetrics. I mean, there's a lot of advanced data warehousing dashboard products out there. One, do you have an alternative to Looker that you like? And it's okay if you don't. And then two, um, how important it is to have one of these tools in your arsenal.
I haven't explored with a lot of others. I did use Domo for quite a bit at a previous agency I was at. That's a very expensive tool. It's not something that like a lot of small businesses could get into necessarily. It's more enterprise, but still like that. But at the end of the day, it's still doing a lot of the same things, right? So the tool you're using doesn't necessarily matter that much. I just use Looker Studio because it's very accessible. It's free. Like, it has some good hooks there, and it's very well supported by a lot of third parties out there where it has direct connections in. You can pull data in easily.
On a scale of 1 to 10, like how important it is to have a tool like this Looker Studio, DataBox, Agency Analytics, some warehousing and reporting dashboard system. 1 to 10, how important is it for a brand?
I think it's super important. Like I feel like everybody has so many things they're trying to do. The last thing you need to be doing is going through five different places to go pull data together into an Excel spreadsheet or in a Google sheet and then go try to interpret and make sense of the data someplace else, because that ends up what's happening. I mean, I just help a client every Sunday. She has to go pull data from three different sources, pull it into a spreadsheet so she can send it out. She spends a couple hours every Sunday doing this, right? And like Looker Studio, yeah, it took a while to get built out, but now it's automatic. It's right there, ready for her. She can go in, she can put her insights in there, but she's not spending all this time like compiling the data, and that's the most frustrating part. So I'd say 100%. Everybody needs it. Should look at doing it. What tool you use, whatever. But it's more about are you spending a lot of time just gathering the data and not actually interpreting the data?
I want to switch gears to because all this is great, but what I want to switch gears to is, can I trust the data? Because that's important. Like I'm going to do all this work to aggregate it and make it visually pretty and do insights and all that. I mean, I got to back all the way up to the beginning and say, can I trust the data? So before we dive into that and an exercise that you did earlier this year that I want to unpack a little bit, I want you to define something for me in your words, because I think it's important as a definition before we dive into the Spark Toro case study. What is dark social?
Dark social is that gap of understanding attribution that happens outside the spaces that you can measure, right? So what that would mean is, and I think there's some different interpretations here and there, but for the most part is, I don't know. Some people even throw it as like it's brand awareness, like it's branding or word of mouth, right? Kind of stuff, right? So where somebody hears about you, makes their way to their website somehow because they saw a blog post that you put out, or sorry, a LinkedIn post you put out, or some other social network you're on, and they found you through there. They made their way to your website and they fill out a form. Well, you have no idea that they're maybe even following you in the social channel, and you have no idea that they didn't like your post, they didn't comment on it, they just saw it, thought it was interesting, and went and then took an action.
Yeah,
That's kind of the dark social space
for you.
is the unknown attribution that's happening on websites or in whatever metrics you're pulling through that you just don't really know how they got there.
Yeah, as a side note, I was having breakfast the other morning, and somebody walked in that I hadn't seen in about 10 years. And after I'm like, okay, I know who this is. He said, "Oh, I've been following you on LinkedIn. You're doing a lot of work in AI. And I was like, and that's to your point. Like
Yeah,
he
totally.
never liked it. He never engaged. I had no idea
Yep.
that he was watching what I was doing. But within 2 minutes of running into him, he knew what I was up to and had been watching what I was doing as a, as a marketer. So,
Totally.
those are things you cannot measure through analytics.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting too, because you and I are pretty active in LinkedIn, and I think there's you just kind of forget that people are paying attention, even though they're not
Really paying
interacting
attention.
in one
Right.
way, because yeah, I've had the same experience where I run into somebody. Oh yeah, I've seen you post about this and this. I'm like, oh, all right, I had no idea. So yeah, it definitely that's part of it, right?
Mhm.
That's getting out there, and I think when as individuals, because we are active, as individuals, as entrepreneurs, and kind of pushing out there, we can kind of get those little tastes of that. I think it's a little bit harder at the brand level. If you're kind of pushing things out at the brand, but it still happens, right? It's still there.
Yeah, I like to run a bit of a tangent, but when I think about content, whether it be for search or social, I know I had a really good piece of content that was well promoted when the sales team or the customer service folks, or you hear of fans and followers actually mentioning it or talking about it in one way or another. So it is different for a brand, but I mean, if we can do this as an individual, I mean, what is possible for a brand and all of the customers that it has and all the and all the super fans and followers that maybe whether it's B2B or B2C or CP, whatever it might be, that is following that brand. So actually, harder for a brand to measure, but there are ways. Like you will still hear these stories. If you've got a good strategy, if you're
Yeah.
looking for the outcome, because maybe it's not watch a video, maybe it's they asked for something of the sales team, or they mentioned something on a customer service call that you had put out there in your brand promise. Who knows? But there could
Yeah.
be some
Or even
off.
those, the forms saying, "Where'd you hear about us?" Which,
Mhm.
there's that's a tricky
That's
one,
a tricky
because
one,
I
right?
heard about you from 5 different places. I have no idea what was the last place I heard about you. I don't know,
Yeah,
or this is Google, whatever. So,
right.
yeah,
Well, the speaking of that attribute of how social can contribute, but maybe not have the attribution all the time that it may or may not deserve. I don't want to say social is some silver bullet to building brand awareness, but I ask all of that because of the Spark Toro uh, exercise that you did with Rand Fishkin earlier this year. So because I think it was kind of born of this: can I trust the attribution? So what were you specifically looking for? And then I'm kind of curious. I think you've told me, but let's share with everybody. Like, how did Spark Toro get involved? Because that's kind of cool.
yeah, yeah. Well, maybe the other way around. I got involved with Spartoro.
Okay,
So
however it
yeah,
happened.
so Rand Fishkin put a post up on LinkedIn, basically questioning the kind of this dark social space of like questioning attribution in the social space, and is the analytics accurate? And are we actually losing attribution coming from certain social channels? I don't exactly know what the post was exactly, but it was worded in some form that way. So it got me thinking. This is like what I've been digging into and really trying to understand, particularly Google Analytics and GA4 and how attribution is different there. And so it was very much on my mind. So I just emailed him and said, "Hey, this is super interesting. I'd love to run a test and let's see if we can actually prove this out." And that was kind of his question: is like, does anybody have any data on this? So I know he loves data, so I thought, all right, let's do it ourselves, like to see if we can actually pull some data out of this. So we worked together on it. I built out a system that basically tracks attribution in GA4. We kept it pretty tight to a very relatively small set that we could control of users, mostly through his network, right? So he reached out to a lot of folks. We built out and created custom URLs that for different platforms. So like for LinkedIn, for TikTok, for Twitter, when it was Twitter. So we had specific links for each of these platforms, and we asked people to then click through on these links, and that's it. Just click through on them, and from these platforms, right? So the links would exist on the platforms. I'd put a post or something on it on the platform. Only they would see those. They'd click through, and it would get to Google Analytics. And so we were tracking to see how often Google Analytics knew that traffic came from that source, or did it attribute it, or did the attribution just drop and go to direct effectively? Direct just means Google doesn't know. So did it fall to direct, right? So that's what we were testing, and found out it was some of it was explicitly done by different platforms where they can basically block the refer and tell whatever website is receiving the traffic that it says, no, we're not going to tell you where it came from. They can kind of block that. In other instances, it's just the way the web works, right? Like attribution kind of just falls off. Also can be different ad blockers and cookie blockers and things, whatever extensions that people have. So there's various different reasons for why attribution might fall off. But we did find that certain channels, you didn't see attribution at all. One instance is in Slack, right? Slack, we don't necessarily think is a social channel, but it really is. I mean, it's depending on, if you're using it internally or if you're in a Slack channel for whatever various topic you're on. If someone puts a link on there, most likely you're going to have no idea it came from there because most people have it on their desktop. It's not coming from a website per se. And so when someone clicks on a link there, attribution doesn't get passed over. So that's like one example. So there's multiple different platforms where we saw a higher level of either no attribution whatsoever or a certain percentage. Facebook and LinkedIn, you did see most of the time attribution came in, but maybe 10, 15, 20%, we didn't see attribution come in. So there is a drop there, right? So just because of the nature of how Google Analytics is able to track, and it's not a Google Analytics thing necessarily in that case, it's just how the web data is getting passed over from site to site before, the tracking can happen.
When you say that in just in case, is the majority of the gap due to cookies and privacy and ad blockers? Like you just don't have the data tracking because of, I don't want to say user choice, but somebody chose to not let this, even inadvertently, they didn't let the data flow for whatever reason. Or is it a fundamental flaw of the internet, like TCP IP or whatever just doesn't work? Like, is it browser based? Is it served? Like, why doesn't the data line up? Because we've been fighting this battle for years and years and years.
I think it's a mix of both. I think for sure ad blockers, when that comes in, that's, that more and more prominent as that's become, part of more, I guess, our culture and what we talk about and things like that in this tech space. But depending on the industry, right? Like if you are in a very tech focused industry, you're probably going to see more folks with ad blockers that is, causing some of these issues. So I think that's a portion of it for sure. I think part of it is just the nature of how data gets passed from website to website. In order for your website to know where the traffic came from, there's a little refer script that kind of like tells you where it came from. That can get blocked. Certain browsers block it just completely, right? So it's not even to have an extension. But if you're using those browsers, you're probably active in the privacy space or know why you're using those browsers. So there's multiple different technology reasons why attribution is just going to not be available. And then the cookie blocking as well. Like that's depending on how your website is set up. If you have privacy settings for cookie acceptance and things like that, you can see huge gaps there. I can see 20, 30, 40% gaps because, you're not firing Google Analytics because you can't, for whatever region you live in, or it's just set up incorrectly. And it's just blocking it inadvertently. So,
okay. So let me ask you a couple, almost rapid fire, but I won't rush you in your answer. We've got a little more time here. As it relates here to attribution, I'm using Google Analytics 4. How important is it I also use Tag Manager?
I advocate for Google Tag Manager all the time because it makes it a lot easier to set up any tag, any tracking you want to happen on your website, Google Analytics, or take a LinkedIn, take Google Ads, any of that. It's a lot easier to get the tracking set up and to track specific events. So as we're talking about the whole, do you want to track when someone watches a video, when they fill out a form, all of those things? It's very, very challenging to do that without a Google Tag Manager or some Tag Manager product. Okay. Google Tag Manager is free. It's easy to use. A lot of people know how to use it or easy quote. It's easy to get into or set up. Anyway.
So now I'm starting to build an analytics stack, if you will. I've got GA4, I've got Looker Studio, now I've got Tag Manager. The next implementation question, should I assume that I should install every pixel tracking possible from the platforms, and particularly the Meta, the Meta Pixel, the LinkedIn tracking, Google Ads? Like, do I also need to install all of those to get a complete picture?
You do. I'd say that with a little hesitancy, only because of like privacy concerns. Like all those platforms want to pull as much data from your website as they possibly can. So just know what you're getting at, like what you're adding on there. But absolutely, if you're running ads on TikTok, or LinkedIn, if you're running ads on Facebook, you need those. You have to have those scripts, those pixels on there to know that your ads are successful. So that's what Tag Manager makes it easy to get those set up. But yeah, you definitely need those to get that full picture.
And then in the Google product suite, you can track events and pass conversions to Google Ads from GA4, or you can track conversions natively with their script. Do you have an opinion as to which way you'd implement?
I prefer the native script. GA4 does have a data delay on it. I don't have any data to back this up. It just feels a little more accurate. Like you actually have a tag that is ready to go that's saying this is going to fire when this event occurs, set up in Google Tag Manager and push the data to Google Ads directly, versus setting up a conversion in GA4, connecting ads to it, and then associating that conversion to ads. You're probably pretty close either way, but I like to have that like confirmation that when the event happens, it's getting passed to ads directly.
And how would you go about measuring the two conversions? Would you try to measure the two numbers? Let's say you have one conversion number from Google Ads and an event number from GA4. Are you going to try to read that in GA4? Are you going to pass the conversion data maybe as read only or something into Google Ads? Like where do you do your comparison to see if you can to see how the attribution's actually working?
So attribution from the standpoint of ads specifically, like Google Ads is going to take as much credit as it can if there was any interaction at some point. And you can set your look back windows to whatever, 30 days, 90 days, to say if there was an ad interaction at some point and then they converted at some point down the line, I don't know, several days later, 2 months later, still give the credit back to ads. Google Ads is going to want to take as much credit there as possible. Google Analytics works differently because it's typically going to give credit to the last session that drove the conversion. And so you're always going to have, if you're looking at your channel, your traffic acquisition report in GA4, that's a kind of a session-based attribution that is giving credit to the last channel that drove that session/conversion. In simple terms, it's a little more complicated.
I know you're talking about one of the things that I specifically can go round and round on, which is the first click, last click. And then how in the heck do you spread it across multiple channels and weight it and try to where does that stand right now in GA4, which is first, last click versus trying to give each of the channels that contributed to the conversion event? Like where is it today? How do I think about that? What should I be doing?
There's basically 4 different models in GA4. The most prominent that you're going to see is in the traffic acquisition report. The traffic acquisition report uses the first session, the first source of the session that drove the conversion. So what that means is, let's say I've been to the site 5 different times. Once I came from email, and then another time I came from paid search, and then finally I came from paid social. And on that paid social visit, I go and I convert. In that report, paid social is going to get 100% of the credit. It's the last source that drove the session before the conversion. So that's the primary method that the reports used in the traffic acquisition report. So we can get into the nuance. There's a lot of nuance which actually causes a lot of issues with how comparing to Universal and how that tracks and all that stuff. But just know that that's primarily the last source that drove it.
Okay.
The other attribution models are ways to look at attribution are the first user source, which is another report called the user acquisition report. That is showing you kind of your top, the first channel or source that drove the user, regardless of how many more times they come to the site. So the first time I come to your site is paid social, I will always fall into paid social in that report, because it's just showing you what channel acquired the user at the user level. So that's another report kind of acquisition or attribution piece. The other part is data-driven attribution. And Google kind of made a big stink about data-driven attribution because, it basically looks at all the touch points that led to a conversion. So in my first example, if I came from email and paid search and paid social over a given amount of time, all of those channels will get some amount of credit in the data-driven model. And so maybe, paid social will get like 60% because that actually closed me. That was the last channel I used. Maybe, paid email will get, I don't know, 15% because that was kind of what introduced me. It was whatever we don't know how they do that. It's all kind of machine learning type stuff, right? But that's the data-driven model, is trying to give partial credit to different channels depending on how they contributed to the conversion. So that one is, I think, is great, right? It's a great way to attribute conversions and give credit to different channels. However, it really doesn't show up in the reports. It only shows up when you go to the advertising section and then go to the attribution comparison report. It's the only place you can see it, really. And so that becomes very problematic because it just doesn't show up in many other places. So I tend to focus more on the traffic acquisition report. It's not similar to Universal Analytics in how it actually tracks, but it's the most similar in how it's trying to track, I guess. So it gets that whole space gets really, really complicated. It's a lot easier with visuals, but yeah, it's a tricky space.
Yeah, it's there's so much to measurement. I mean, they're setting it up, then you got to read it, and even here, like even when you're reading the data, you got to be like, well, what is the default configuration, and what?
Yeah.
You stopped yourself from calling it a model. It's not really a model. It's something else. It's just a different perspective on the same exact event, because the customer journey often, statistically, is multiple touch points. Yeah, we're all guilty of that, impromptu TikTok or IG purchase. But usually, I visit a website a few times, I look at consumer reviews, I do different things that, would all kind of play into that, and what I find with brands is that branded paid search and email often get the last touch attribution, even though search or social might have gotten the user to come to the brand for the first time. And that, a marketer can understand that, but it gets harder when you start to push it into the C-suite, because they just want to know where did the leads or the sales come from? And they often come from an email blast, or from the paid search agency, on a branded search, because now I've made my decision and I just want to get to the website. One thing that you brought up going back that I find really interesting is that the fact that Slack can't be, right, that makes sense that it wouldn't be trackable from the desktop. Is that true on mobile?
On the mobile app. Yeah.
Okay, so if you're in the mobile app, because it feels like to me that GA4 had this promise of better tracking on mobile, but it didn't try to solve that. It was just more trying to solve for the device.
Yeah. So GA4's attempt to try and do a better job of stitching mobile and web data together. So mobile apps. And this is if you have a mobile app that someone has on your mobile phone, or mobile web, doesn't matter, right? The way they try to stitch that together, one is a user ID. So you can basically, if you have a mobile app, someone logs in, you're signed in, you know who that user is, you can push a user ID over into GA, and then it can stitch together as long as they're logged in both places. That's where the gap can happen if they're not logged in. The other piece is something called Google Signals, which was if you're logged into a Google Chrome and they know who you are because you're logged into Google Chrome and you're on your mobile device on a website on Chrome, it knows who you are. And then you go to a desktop and you're on Chrome and you're logged in, same profile, right? So that's how Google can stitch those two things together. It caused huge issues with the reporting because they were basically thresholding or suppressing the data that it would show because of privacy concerns. So like that whole like promise of we'll be able to stitch mobile and desktop together because we know who they are with Google Signals.
But you're not supposed to know who they are.
It caused problems because they would just suppress the data and then your
Right.
reports were totally off.
Right.
So they're actually scrapping that part of it in February of 2024. So they're still going to use Google Signals for ads. You can still use that data to feed your ads, but in the reporting inside Google Analytics, it'll no longer show that data, which is actually a good thing because it really caused issues. So anyways, Google has attempted that. I'm not, it's not really been very helpful.
Yeah. All right. In wrapping up, we covered all kinds of different topics and broke some of them down, and some of them we kind of left hanging. But let's say I'm emerging a smaller brand. I've got a small team. I know analytics is important. I want to have really good data. And that is a plug for reallygoodData.com, which will be in the show notes as well. But where would I start? Like, think 90 days. That's about as far as I like to think sometimes. In 90 days, if I wanted to make some improvement to my analytics, to my reporting, wherever, give me a manageable hit list. Maybe I'm willing to spend 4, 5, 6 hours here. Where would I start? And again, we don't know what you know.
Let's start at the basics. Are you tracking, like back to those business questions, do you have the data to answer your business questions? And do you know where to go in GA, in this case, to answer those questions? So if you want someone to go, if there's filling out a registration form or a trial form, do you know you're capturing that data? And do you know it's coming if you're running marketing from different paid channels, email, whatever? Are you properly getting that data attributed to those channels? Like that's the two key things. And the reason I bring up the attribution again is that comes into like UTM parameters and making sure you've got your links set up properly to attribute it. Forget about how GA does it, but just is it getting attributed because you're setting up your marketing the right way for Google Analytics to understand it? So that's where I'd start. It's like the very basics. When you look at the traffic acquisition report, you go look at the conversions and the traffic you're driving. Is the numbers match up to what you think it should be based on your spend, the kind of marketing you're pushing, and then is that leading? And are you seeing the right kind of conversions? That's the baseline.
Right. So you'll see where I'm going with it in just a second as I wrap up. So I figured out 3 outcomes for my website, and let's say I get 10,000 visits a month and maybe 100 conversions, right? Just so we got enough, but we don't have a ton. 100 sales, 100 leads, whatever it might be. And I've got a couple outcomes. I look around. I don't know where to go. The channel reporting's a mess. I don't have Google Tag Manager. Like, literally, I say, what the hell? And I just ignore it all, right? Like, it seems so overwhelming. Like, I know what you said is simple. Figure out your outcomes and then make sure you can track it. I take one look at that and I just say, nope, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing on Sunday. I don't want to climb that hill. Why would I climb that hill? Like, evangelize for really good data. Like, why? What is the promise once I do all this work?
Because your life can be easier, right? Like, you don't need to spend that 2 hours on a Sunday, every Sunday doing it. Like, but this is what I do. Like, I spend a gazillion hours just understanding this and really trying to understand it the best I can to help folks. And so that's really, I guess, what I do, right? Is you need somebody more than likely that has been in this to help you get set up. It is difficult to do on your own. So yeah, I mean,
okay.
Yeah.
So if they don't, let me again call Steve, but if they don't talk to you, where else can they go? Can they go to their web agency? Can they go to their paid search agency? Do they need to hire a consultant? Like, where would they get the help? Because it's too much, honestly. Like, it's a lot. Where can they get some help?
I would start, if you work with an agency, start there. I would say, so I'm in a great Slack group. It's called Measure Slack. It's fantastic. Can't say enough good things about it. There are, I'm pretty active on it. There's a lot of folks that are active on it. Ask questions, right? Like, that is the place to go if you have questions about any of this stuff, and not just Google Analytics. It's like any sort of analytics measurement tool. If you're using Adobe Analytics, you're using, you're doing A/B testing, whatever. There's different channels for this. If you want to do it yourself and you kind of know enough and you're just struggling with some things, go there. It is the most active generous measure or channel that I've ever been a part of. It's great. So yeah, if you have the time and you have the capacity, you want to learn it, you can get into there where you've got some support where you can ask questions. There's also some great tools out there as well, which one is, I'm leaving my mind. Google has actually some decent training tools as well for GA specifically that you can get into as well. So it doesn't get into Google Tag Manager and the setup of things, but it's more like how do you use Google Analytics 4 and what are the differences and stuff. So their documentation, I give them like a B in terms of the documentation. Like it's pretty good. There's definitely some gaps, but yeah, I'd start there too.
So I could go to my agency. I could try to do some of this myself. Let's say that neither of those work. Are there a lot of folks or people like you out there that can help? Like, can they find GA4 expertise? Like, I can find a lot of WordPress developers. Can I find people to help? Or is what you're doing kind of very very unique? You find a lot on what do you call that? Measure Slack? Is there a lot of
Measure
other
Slack? Yeah.
A lot of other.
There's a lot of folks on there that are super active answering questions and such. So yeah, you can definitely find them. It's just because it's so new, right? Like WordPress has been around forever, right? Like you those things you can, and just because Google Analytics has been around forever, the GA4 nuance makes it more complicated. So yeah, I have found, and that's why I've dug in so much into this because I really want to understand it, that there just aren't a lot of folks out there that have really gotten to the depth of knowledge that is needed to really understand it, to like set things up properly.
Yeah. So just preparing everybody, your web or search agency may not, they can help specifically with Google Tag Manager maybe, and getting a couple basic events set up. As you get deeper and deeper into this, just don't get discouraged. Keep looking, keep asking questions, reach out, even on LinkedIn to Steve or to myself. There's a lot of people that want to help. This is not easy, but I feel that once you have this set up, it can be a very valuable piece of insights that you can make some really good business decisions on. I've on occasion seen somebody or seen brands finally get out a piece of data that they knew was important, and it changed their trajectory once they could understand the outcome, measure it, and then improve it in their optimization. But I mean, it might have taken a good year of banging our heads to get there. But I feel like it's worth it in most cases, but you do have to start at the beginning and say, is this really worth it? Is the data going to be worth it? Or are we going to take action on it in a way and be willing to kind of change our marketing and our business based on what it's telling us? Much like launching a campaign, you almost have to think, do I want to put time and energy into getting this all set up right? And again, that's a function sometimes of an ad budget. The bigger your budget, the more ROI you'll get from things like this. Smaller budgets, sometimes not as much. But hey, well, Steve, we're at the top of the hour. Hey, I could go on forever with this, but thank you so much for your expertise and the time with us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Super glad to have joined you. It was fun.